Good morning. Welcome to the Minnesota Bike Walk Leadership Network webinar. My name is Natalie Gilly and I'm with the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen and we'll get this webinar started. So today is our October webinar and the spotlight community today is Dilworth. So we're going to follow the footprints to walk through Dilworth. This is the walking webinar, so that's our featured topic today. And we're at October 20th, 2021. So welcome to the webinar. So we'd like you to introduce yourself in the chat box by typing your name and location. And our question of the day today is eggnog or mulled apple cider? Which camp are you in? I guess you could share that you like both if you'd like, but go ahead and share in the chat box who you are and where you're joining us from today, and a preference here for your holiday drink or, cold weather drink. Wonderful. So we have some folks joining today from Fergus Falls, Olmsted County, Mankato, Minneapolis, Rochester, Wabasha, Northfield, and some people are coloring outside the lines and have indicated that beer is a favorite beverage. That's fine. We welcome all of you to the webinar today. So we have a mix of a lot of apple cider and eggnog. So thanks for participating and welcome. You are joining the Minnesota Bike Walk Leadership Network webinar today, and our purpose of this network is to connect the local bike walk leaders to share stories and ideas about how they're lifting up the walking and biking culture in their communities. We also have a land acknowledgement statement here at Bike MN, and I'd like to go ahead and read the statement. We want to acknowledge that we occupy the ancestral land of the several indigenous groups, including the Dakota, Ojibwe, Ho-Chunk, Cheyenne, Oto, Iowa, and Meskwaki people. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. We affirm the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota's commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban Indian communities. Despite centuries of colonial violence, this is still and always will be Indigenous land. Indigenous peoples are still here, demonstrating innumerable talents and gifts in the midst of continued oppression. They must be celebrated and uplifted. You'll see here on the screen there is a link, and I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let me go back to the screen I'm wanting to share. So there's a link here. It's https /native-land.ca/ So you'll see the link on here. If you want to type it into your screen, you can pull up the native land that you're currently located on. So it's good to know where you're at. So, all right. So the next couple of slides here are just some housekeeping as far as upcoming webinars. So for Bike MN, we have 2 left for 2021. In November, we're going to go to the community of Stillwater and talk about car-free public spaces. So some of you may know that Stillwater recently applied for a bicycle-friendly community, and this is their first time applying, and they're waiting to see if they are going to receive an award. So we're sitting on the edge of our chairs here waiting to see if we have some new information. We'll see what we find out before November 17th, so stay tuned. In December, we're going to feature the community of Rochester. Biking and walking for all ages will be the topic. If you're here as a guest today and you're not currently a member of the webinar network, feel free to email me at natalie@bikemn.org and we'll go ahead and get you added. Some of you may be members of the Minnesota Safe Routes to School Network as well. And the webinars are also held monthly on the second Thursday. So the topic in October, recently they covered the discussion around the bus driver shortage. And then in November and December, the topics will be around Safe Routes to School Boost Grant success stories. So if you're interested in this and the grant opportunity is available right now, this is a way to learn a little bit about maybe what are some of the stories that from successful grants that have been funded through this program. So today we have 2 speakers, and I would like to introduce our first speaker today. The first speaker for our webinar is Dan Farnsworth. He is a transportation planner for Fargo-Moorhead MetroCog. Dan is the transportation planner for MetroCog and has been with them since 2012. Dan is also the bicycle and pedestrian coordinator for MetroCog, which entails chairing the Fargo-Moorhead Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee, leading Fargo-Moorhead's bicycle accounting program, leading bicycle and pedestrian studies, and several other bicycle and pedestrian related functions. Dan enjoys riding his bike for all purposes: recreation, exercise, commuting, and occasionally grocery shopping. Welcome to the webinar, Dan.
All right. Thank you, Natalie. And thank you all for allowing me to present. It's nice to meet you all and see you all. I recognize a few names on here. So anyway, today I'm just going to talk about some efforts that the city of Dilworth has done in the past years regarding pedestrian, making it more pedestrian friendly. So we can go on to the next slide. So how many of you know where the city of Dilworth is? Blink twice if you know where it is, once if you don't. Okay, you all know where it is. Okay, so for those of you who don't know where it is, Dilworth is located right next to Moorhead, Minnesota there. So, and then of course Fargo is across the river from there. So it's part of the Fargo-Moorhead metro area. And so that's where it's located. And you can see there on the map, it's there in Clay County. And yeah, next slide there. So Dilworth is, I guess, for lack of a better term, a bedroom community. Like I said, just east of Moorhead, just adjacent to Moorhead, Minnesota, and has a population of about 4,600 people as of the latest census here. And it's part of the Fargo-Moorhead metro area. Up there you can see a picture of it, and that's Highway 10 heading out towards to the east towards Lakes Country. And so Highway 10 goes right to the south of Dilworth there. Go on to the next slide there. So there's two topics that we'll talk about here today, and one of them is Dilworth walking routes that got established not too long ago. And then also another one is a campaign called Shovel Dilworth. So I'll talk about those two here as part of this presentation. All right, so Dilworth bike routes, or walking routes, I should say, excuse me, that began in 2019. And so I was talking to the city administrator of the city of Dilworth, and he came up with this idea. When I asked him about this, how it kind of came to fruition, he said that he was at a amusement park in Ohio, and he noticed that there were all these different colored footprints going to different rides there. I think they were in different shapes based on the theme of the ride or something like that. And so it kind of pointed you to how to get to those rides. And so he got an idea with that, and he had seen signs in other communities for different routes, and he had seen routes in different communities. And so we kind of put these together and decided, you know what, this might be a good thing for our community, our small community. And so you can see there in this picture on the slide that there are signs along the routes, and this is the red route. There's a total of 4 routes, and this route here is 1.1 miles in particular. And anybody who's on that route, they can scan the QR code there on the corner, and it'll pop up a map, and they can see the different routes and kind of get an idea of where they are. And if you look closely in the slide, you can also see 2 red footprints on the pavement that are stenciled there, and those delineate the route. So we can go to the next slide there. So this slide here is a map of the 4 routes that the city of Dilworth has established, and that's what you would see if you were to scan the QR code with your phone as you're walking around. And so there's that red route, which is 1.1 miles. There is also a yellow route, might be a little bit harder to see just because of the background, but that yellow route is an out and back route. So that's 1.8 miles if you just go one way, or 3.6 both ways. There's the orange route, that's 1.3 miles, and then a purple route, which is a loop and that one is 2 miles. So the residents can choose, how far do I want to go? How far do I want to walk, run, whatever it might be? And they can switch it up if they want, or they can do multiple routes. So I'll go on to the next slide there. And there's another picture of, that'd be the red route again. And it's just a really great idea that they came up with. It's a really low cost project. You know how bicycle pedestrian projects can be. They can be pretty controversial. What a waste of money, or sometimes you hear that from citizens, or will anybody use it? But this was really well thought out and just simple, and a lot of people have used it. And so, just to give you an idea of how it works, is that there's signs that were, I believe that those were funded by Partnership for Health. And Patrick, feel free to put something in the chat if I misspoke on that. And then the city created the online maps, I believe. And then the city's maintenance department just stenciled in the stencils into the sidewalk. And so it's nothing more than just creating a stencil template along with some spray paint, or some kind of a paint, I guess it is. And then they go out and refresh those every couple of years or so. And so it's really simple, cheap, and the public has really enjoyed it. And so it's funded by the city of Dilworth, and then Partnership for Health also pitched into that. And I just see something on the chat there that Patrick did confirm that Partnership for Health did fund those signs. So great work on that. Go to the next slide there. And then let's see, it looks like there's then there's two more routes there, and these routes just happen to be on the same pass. The yellow one was the out and back one, and the purple one is a loop. So you can see that there's a person walking there, and she's got her dog, and it's a popular route. When we went out there to take pictures, we saw people taking these routes in the middle of the day, and talking to the city administrator. It seems to be very popular by the public, and no complaints, only compliments. So that's really good news to hear. So, and they are considering expanding the system as well, as long as they can add some more trails and sidewalks to the network. Okay, well then moving on to the second item is Shovel Dilworth. And this is a campaign that's been around since, I believe, 2014. And so this was a campaign also in partnership with Partnership for Health. And for anyone who doesn't know who Partnership for Health is, they are the health organization. They are a collaboration of community and public health partners in Becker, Clay, Ottertail, and Wilkin counties on this part of the state. And so anyway, this program here, Shovel Dilworth, is a campaign run by the city of Dilworth, Partnership for Health, even the Lions Club, to encourage shoveling sidewalks, being physically active in wintertime, and just general good Samaritan behavior. Next slide, please. So this was a flyer that they came out with at the beginning of the program, and you can see there kind of what the program entails and the different partners involved. And so the idea of this campaign is that there's a little incentive for anyone in the city to shovel someone's not driveway, but sidewalk, maybe a bus stop or a fire hydrant, or any just neglected sidewalk. So that's the idea there, because some people maybe they're out of town, or they're elderly and they can't do their own sidewalk. And so this is a campaign to do that. And as an incentive, they can register to win a $25 gift card, or they can also hashtag this and put it on Facebook and fun things like that. So anyway, and this was also in partnership with a Minnesota Green Corps member who was with Partnership for Health too. So you can see his name on the bottom of this. So we'll go to the next slide. And there's the Facebook page. They keep this Facebook page active. It's called Shovel Dilworth, and then there's the hashtag Shovel Dilworth. And so people can post pictures, they can put it onto the Facebook page. Sometimes they have fun, the city does, and just keeps encouraging people to shovel and has some fun little images that they put on there. And you can see those images, two of them that I clipped out of there on the bottom of the slide. Go to the next slide. And another thing there is door hangers. So when they were first getting the word out there, they put these on people's doors. You can see the little cutout there on that image, and that goes on people's doorknobs of the front doors. I'm not sure if they did the full city or just certain areas to get the word out there. But anyway, there's pretty decent participation. I don't have the numbers toward the beginning of this, but in 2019, 2020 season, where we had a decent amount of snow, there's 18 people who had subscribed and were shoveling other people's driveways or fire hydrants and so on. As far as the numbers weren't so high in 2020 to 2021, there wasn't much snow, plus it was an odd year. So that's what we have for the numbers. Hopefully, I wish I had more numbers for you, but that's what I received from the city. And anyway, if you're curious to find out more about either the Dilworth bike walking route, or Shovel Dilworth, you can go to the city's website, which is cityofdilworth.com, and you can click on the Parks and Rec departments, Parks and Rec, and walking path. And so I can go ahead and even put that in the chat box, and so that you can not have to go through all the clicks, but you can kind of see how to get to that. And then as far as Shovel Dilworth, they don't have their own website, but they do have the Facebook page that we showed you. So you can just search Shovel Dilworth on Facebook. If you have any questions about how this works directly, or want to maybe implement something like that in your own community, feel free to contact the city of Dilworth at the numbers below. And I also will give you my contact information on the following slide. Maybe I can post these things in the chat if that helps. So anyway, my contact information is also available. So with that said, I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks for your presentation, Dan, and thanks for also sharing with the participants of the webinar and anyone watching the webinar and replay your contact information by email and by phone. So I'm excited to hear this story today because, you know, Fargo and Moorhead always get a lot of recognition, and you hear about that a lot. And what you may or may not know is that when Dan and others in that community went for pursued bicycle-friendly community, they pursued as a metro, which included Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo, and Dilworth. So they were part of that. So if you've heard of Fargo, Moorhead Metro as a bicycle-friendly community, that includes Dilworth. So additional context about your community, and it's just exciting to hear all about that today. So we do have one question in the chat box for you, Dan. Are bicyclists allowed to use the walking routes?
Yes, they would be. A lot of the routes, as many as they can, they put them on shared use paths, and so bikes are allowed on those. And then bikes are allowed on the sidewalk. Now, the Minnesota statute is not through essential business district. So just looking at the map there, I guess the purple route might be getting close to essential business district, but I don't know where the definition of that is. So I think it's safe to say that bikes are allowed on these routes.
Okay, we have another question here in the chat box. Any warnings or concerns about people with heart conditions participating in Shovel Dilworth?
Oh, that is a good question. I don't have the answer to that. I'm not sure if they vet that as far as when they accept the applicants, but I do believe that a lot of the people doing this might be younger folks, maybe even ones who are looking for volunteer credits and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, does anyone else have a question here? When you were joining the webinar today, you went on mute, so you are all muted. So if you'd like to ask a question audibly, then if you'd like to unmute yourself, we'll pause for a moment to take any of those questions. And there is a comment here, actually, and another question in the chat box. I'll get to the question in a moment here. The comment is about if they don't shovel, they could develop a heart condition. So a good way to stay physically active by shoveling. The other question here is there a city ordinance for shoveling sidewalks in Dilworth? Did the program reduce number of citations? And there's some frustration around unshoveled walks. Dan, did you want to speak to that question?
Yeah, thanks. As of a few years ago, there actually wasn't a specific ordinance on shoveling of sidewalks, and so not sure if that's going to be changing or not. But when this program was launched, there wasn't at the time.
Okay, I know that was one of the questions I had too. This is from Matthew in the chat box, about the ordinance and about, whose responsibility is it to clear the snow that's on the sidewalks? Is it the owner of the home that's adjacent to the sidewalk? Or is it, the city, and who helps those who are maybe not able to clear that snow themselves, but need that space cleared to get to where they need to go? So I appreciate the campaign that you shared today, Dan, because there was that encouraging people to help their neighbor and help other folks in the community to make that happen, and some incentives as well to encourage people to do that. So that's great to hear. So let's see here. This is a question in the chat box. Another one for you, Dan. Wondering about you if you had mentioned about could people or businesses request to be recipients of others shoveling their sidewalks?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe when they allocate the sidewalks to be shoveled, that if there's a business or someone who might need it for a good reason, then that might be then they might allocate people to shovel that sidewalk. And even if Patrick has any other thoughts on this one, feel free to chat that in the type. Put that in the box there.
Yeah, Patrick, you're welcome to join. And even if you want to go off mute for a moment, we're going to cut over to Dave here as the second speaker around noon. But we have just a couple of minutes to wrap up a little bit of discussion here on Dilworth.
Hey, everybody. 2014 was a while ago, but when Will Mackaman, our Green Corps member, set this whole thing up in Dilworth, I believe part of the idea was that, and I think he worked with the local Boy Scout troop on this, was that young people would be available to help with shoveling for particularly elderly. That's what they had in mind back then, who needed help keeping their walk clear. And so I think there was some of that sort of on request type of service happening. But Will was in charge, and that was 7 years ago, and I don't remember the details of that. But yes, I think it was part of the idea was to aid particularly elderly residents in the community that were having difficulty keeping their walks clear.
Thanks for adding that, Patrick, and for the work that you've done with Green Corps. Those partnerships and the work with the local groups like Dan and MetroCog and many others, in West Central Minnesota, make these campaigns come to life and happen and make them successful. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
All right. I don't see any other questions in the chat box. This is the opportunity to ask your question of Dan, or else hold till the end. We'll have a second presentation here and some Q&A for Dave, and then we'll wrap up at the end with any remaining questions that you might have. Is there anyone else that wanted to ask Dan a question before we move on to the next speaker? All right. So thank you so much, Dan. We'll come back to you if we get some questions at the end.
Thank you.
All right. So our next speaker today, I'm thrilled to announce a MnDOT speaker here to the group, Dave Cowan. Many of you probably know who he is, Safe Routes to School Coordinator. And he will be talking today a little bit about their walking campaign. So welcome to the webinar, Dave.
Thrilled to introduce a MnDOT speaker, Natalie. How about that? I think you were going to have one last slide up, or is that at the end of this presentation, just to make sure folks are aware of some of the upcoming opportunities we have? If not, I can move forward. We can come back to it.
Yes, let me go ahead and share my screen again. I kind of jumped the gun here and went to remove screen sharing so that you could go. Let me just
Yeah. Well, while you do that, I mean, it's kind of fun that we were talking a little bit about Shovel Dilworth and the kind of like walking routes that Dan was talking about, because those are certainly eligible projects if they're a part of a Safe Routes to School effort with our Boost implementation grants. But we have a number of grant solicitations that are open right now at MnDOT for walking and biking projects related to students getting to and from school. So if you happen to be working with a community or are part of a community that has yet to really embark on any Safe Routes work, I suggest you look into our planning assistance grant availability. If you have been doing Safe Routes to School for a while and would like to fund some fun and effective ideas like Dan was talking about, you should check out our Boost implementation grants. And if you have a piece of infrastructure that is just dying to be improved, you can look towards our state infrastructure or TA infrastructure solicitations. What's up on the screen is actually webinars that we're holding to help people understand the application, the process around applying. So feel free to join us there. And I think that Natalie dropped a link that just kind of brings you to our main grant page. If you click on any one of these grants, it has the application, the guide for completing that application. And then as you scroll down, you'll notice that we have links to the live webinars that can give you that background information. We would love to see applications from you all, so please take a look, and hopefully we'll hear from you in the future. And now, if that's all right with you, Natalie, I'll share my screen and get started with part 2.
Thanks, Dave. And hopefully the link is the link that you wanted here. If there was any other links, feel free to add those, and Dan as well, if there was some follow-up links to the things that you shared, so that people in chat box can link to those different programs.
Great. So that was my Safe Routes part of the presentation. I'm going to put on my Michelle Pooler hat here. She was the person here that was going to be coming and talking to you all about MnDOT's pedestrian campaign. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it today, so here I am. I thought I'd start out by asking if you can see the image at the top of the pedestrian campaign slide here. How many of you have seen in the past couple of months pedestrian safety education in different places? And if you wouldn't mind, thanks Pam for raising your hand. Pull up the chat box and type in where you saw it. Did you hear it on the radio? Was it on TV? Are you catching it via social media? Where are you seeing these messages, and probably some of the imagery that's similar to what you're seeing on this slide? Ooh, Jane saw it on TV. Great, great. Social media, some of the work that Luke's been doing with TZD. A lot of social media. Grand. Well, that's what we're here to talk about today. I was going to give you a little bit of background on this pedestrian campaign, and then talk you through a little bit of how you might be able to interact with it in the future as advocates for safer walking and biking. I don't think the problem is a mystery to anybody that's on this call, but I'll run through it anyway. You know, in Minnesota, we've had an increasing amount of pedestrian fatalities and injuries over the years. This is a growing issue that has formally been acknowledged by the Department of Transportation, the Department of Health, and Public Safety. And you know, the truth is, or the reality is like with groups like Towards Zero Death, we're just not making the same progress eliminating or even reducing pedestrian fatalities as we are with motor vehicle deaths. So while we're seeing some decreases due to a variety of measures we've been implementing around motor vehicle deaths, that is not the case with pedestrian fatalities. This isn't necessarily just a Minnesota problem. We're seeing this nationally, of course, and really until, well, I also think many of you on the call recognize this, until we're able to do something more significant with our infrastructure, we need to be pushing more education and encouragement around pedestrian safety. Well, we had done this with some materials at MnDOT over a decade ago. Those were getting a little bit of dust on them, maybe a little too old in what they were trying to convey. So I'm going to get the timing wrong here, but 2 or 3 years ago, we set forth on updating our pedestrian safety campaign. We certainly wanted to convey the message that everybody walks at some point during the day, and most people start and end the day on foot. We wanted to make sure that both safe driving and walking behaviors were being promoted, and we wanted to work on reducing some of these crashes we were seeing in Minnesota. And one of the ways that we knew to do that was to start using more people-centric language, kind of de-othering folks in this process, stop pointing the finger at one another, and I guess continue to make aware drivers that they're protected in their vehicles, whereas there are many vulnerable road users out there that are not, and that their mistakes affect people's lives. So we took that problem and that purpose, and I put together a pedestrian advisory committee at MnDOT, and with partners, some of you may have participated in this process, and looked at some of the data-driven messages that we could develop. The PAC both looked at where we were seeing injuries or fatalities and what kind of behaviors were leading to those. They developed some messages for use statewide. And we had over 1,800 people that provided input, both on the graphics that are a part of this campaign, as well as the messages. Some of those are up on the screen here. I won't read those to you, but they're there if you'd like to take a look. And they are divided kind of into these two separate categories of what do we need to be talking to drivers about, and what do we need to talk to people that are walking about. The campaign was launched just back in July. It was a soft launch. We did a couple of neat things with it. The governor recorded a video, if any of you caught that, in support of the pedestrian safety campaign. There was a social media takeover that took a lot of the materials that we have available and blasted those out. And Carol Levin was doing commercials, and we had radio ads and interviews all around this pedestrian safety campaign. So a lot of materials came out of it. They worked on the messages, they worked on the imagery, and we ended up with a whole host of ways that you can be communicating this, either through GIFs or GIFs. I forget how that's pronounced, but those are like, they look like a photo that moves, posters, radio ads, little pocket cards that have some reminders on it. We have a toolkit in development, video messages that can be shared, social media examples, and some materials that we've adapted for use in tribal nations. So there's a whole host of materials that can be used. And when I think of what Dan was talking about with Shovel Dilworth and that campaign, I feel like sometimes the lift for those of you working locally is like, oh, how are we going to have the time or availability or input to be able to create something that we would then share and have this whole campaign around shoveling? Well, our hope with this is that that's all pre-made for you. So if you want to take on a local pedestrian safety campaign, yes, we are pushing this stuff out statewide, and you might see it in your communities. Hopefully you are seeing it in your communities, but also that you'll be able to grab this toolkit and maybe start to push some of these out on your own, and maybe adapt them to your own local initiatives. So all of these materials are available. I'd love to like drop the link for you right now where you could go download them. But unfortunately, we're still trying to get them up on the website in a place where people can grab them. So I will share Michelle's email address when I get done, and she would be happy to send you these materials should you want them. And then just to give you, I mean, so I don't know if you've been noticing kind of faded in the background of a lot of these slides have been some of these materials that you might want to share. We also have a video that I'm getting ready to show you, and as well as a radio ad. So put your ears on and let's see if this works.
Headed out? MnDOT reminds you to look for people everywhere, day or night, and stop for people crossing the road. It's a fact, slower speeds save lives. Let's move safely together.
So there's a quick and easy one that could be shared in a number of different venues. And then, oh,
Headed out?
let's see if we can do the radio ad.
On the go, MnDOT reminds you to look in all directions before turning. Be alert and expect to see people walking everywhere, not just crosswalks. Please stop for people crossing the road. Let's move safely together.
So that's just a little test run of some of the materials that we do have available. I'm happy to answer as many questions as I'm capable of. Like I said, this is not necessarily a project that I've been working on through its development, but I'm happy to answer what I can.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for jumping in for Michelle here and presenting the materials. And we do have some questions in the chat box here. So I have at least two here. And one is about the link about the video that we just saw. I think people are interested in seeing that video again, and maybe sharing it with locals if you, let's see here. I don't know if Dave, if you can put it in the chat box, I can put it in the chat box if I know.
Yeah. Well, that video is embedded in the presentation. Oof. Storm's hitting here. Sorry, did you hear that? That was really loud, like thunder crash.
And Dave.
I can look and try and drop the link. She did mention to me that some of the videos are already on YouTube, so you may be able to Google that and find it. But I don't have any links that were given to me as a part of the presentation that's embedded in it. Okay. Maybe I'll try and Google it myself.
As a follow-up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think maybe as a follow-up, I'll ask Michelle when the website is live with all of these materials to share that back. But as I mentioned before, her email address is here. If you just want to email her directly, she can send you the whole kit.
Perfect. Thanks, Dave. We have a couple of questions. There was one about if there's any data on distracted walkers who are reading things on their phone, that kind of thing.
I know that there is data on that. Is there a specific question as to how it might affect the campaign, or are they wondering what percentage of folks are distracted?
So the person who asked the question, if you want to ask, add some follow-up in the chat box or go off mute and ask Dave directly. We'll hold a moment for that.
Mm-hmm. One of the, how many crashes are involving distracted walkers? One of the things I'll add, I can follow up with whatever that data point might be. I know that as a pedestrian advocate, one of the things that I think about a lot is the environment in which folks are being asked to walk inside of, and so even if they happen to be unpaying attention in the moment, the vehicles around them, their turning speeds, some of the comments that came in here as to vehicle size, and with great power comes great responsibility, is recognizing that there's a lot of ways that we can maybe accidentally start pointing blame at pedestrians for trying to get somewhere in an environment that isn't really designed for them to move safely. And so, well, I will follow up and ask Michelle to email you, Natalie, that information. I also suggest that we're careful about getting too far down a rabbit hole about fault. I think that was part of what the PAC suggested during the development of these materials, is that we're not doing too much finger pointing, but trying to figure out what is safe behavior and encourage it.
Thanks. I think that's really helpful perspective to make sure that we're keeping in mind as we have these conversations and implement strategies in the communities. We can get really excited about this after presentations such as today's, to just, maybe be motivated to apply for a grant, think about what we can do in our own communities. Since this is a statewide network, there's folks that are joining today from throughout the state of Minnesota. And, it's fun to see this kind of thing ripple out across the state to communities such as Dilworth that we featured today. So one other comment here. Well, this is a comment, and again, Dave, you recognize this, that the audience that we have on the webinar today, a lot of this information is maybe not new to them, but the comment about with great power comes even greater responsibility. People driving cars need to remember their power, multiple tons versus a human if there's ever a collision. So
yes,
good reminder. So all right, well, I'm just going to make sure that I'm not missing anyone. And again, if you'd like to go off mute, if you have a question, I think we've covered the ones that are in the chat box right now. But for folks who would like to ask a question and go live here, feel free to unmute and share your video if you'd like, so we can see you and ask a question of Dave.
Hey, I'm somewhat more presentable now, so I'll ask my question live. I was curious, just Dave, how might local bicycling and walking advocates be involved in some of the maybe TZD work that's happening, or other MnDOT within their respective districts? Like how can we advocates be a part of some of the planning and programming, so that we can kind of make effects at a strategic level rather than just simply be that boots on the ground? What advice might you have?
Sure. So I can tell you how it works with Safe Routes, and I know it also works with TZD, that there are local and regional TZD and Safe Routes committees. So folks that are thinking about this, I think most of you are probably more familiar with like a Safe Routes team that you might show up for and start talking or working with them on. But TZD does the same thing. And so I know like Patrick's on the call, and he's a shift coordinator who can talk about how locally he may have worked with the TZD committee to get in there. I will say, and this is just the role of an advocate, is there's a lot of meetings that you end up attending, and it's good for you to be there. And sometimes it takes a decent amount of time to find the moment where it's like most critical that you're there. It doesn't always happen in one meeting. It is a long haul, but that, I think, is what advocacy is made of. And I think I saw Patrick getting ready to share some.
Yeah. So Wayne is also on this call, and Wayne and I belong to the MnDOT District 4 TZD group, or the West Central Minnesota TZD group. I believe the Towards Zero Deaths program is divided by MnDOT districts around the state, and they tend to meet quarterly, and they're open to a very wide range of people. Basically anybody who's got a stake in reducing deaths on Minnesota's roads is welcome to participate. So Matt, I don't know what part of Minnesota you're in, but certainly there is a TZD group corresponding to where you live. And I would say find out who those people are and start showing up at their meetings. Wayne, do you have anything to add to that?
No, Patrick, I think you said it very eloquently. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. And my question, I suppose, was cloaked in a way, because We Bike Rochester does participate, and I'm in Rochester, Minnesota, District 6. And we do participate in TZD meetings here. on behalf of the bicycling community and those interested in roadway safety. And I've noticed that a lot of the participation is from law enforcement, because that seems to be a pillar of what TZD, how TZD does their programming and work, and who their stakeholders might be. And so I guess what I'm trying to determine is where do we as bicycling advocates with limited bandwidth and resources as mighty volunteers, how do we best allocate that time? And I'm hearing Dave's encouragement to be patient, participate on an ongoing basis, which we will do our darndest to. I just hoped for that further guidance on how to navigate collaboration with law enforcement, TZD program managers, et cetera, to start injecting some of this safety-minded, safety mindset, and not necessarily enforcement mindset.
Yeah, Matthew, this sounds like a great future topic that I think it could cover an entire hour of having some folks from TZD come here, maybe talk about some successes that they've had working with local advocacy groups, and where that's gone inside of each of the districts. I saw Natalie take a note, so maybe it's going to happen.
You're keeping an eye on me there, Dave. Yes, I did. You know, I go between electronic and paper. You know, I'm not 100% off of paper. But you know, I was, as you were saying your comment, Matt, and asking your question, and Dave, as you were responding to, I was thinking about how do we incorporate those. You know, we have this Bike Walk Leadership Network, and we have rotating topics in spotlight communities. And then the Safe Routes to School Network also has their featured topics, and rotate each month with different ones related to the work Safe Routes to School. So they tend to be a little more focused on the youth education and those programming, and the grants featured on the infrastructure, like Dave was mentioning. You know, what are the routes, and taking a look at, you know, what are the spaces that we've created for the youth to walk to school. You know, do they have a safe way to get there? You know, and then we have our topics here on this Bike Walk Leadership Network too, that's a little bit more broad, focused on biking and walking. A lot of it's related to bicycle friendly community and some of the broader strategies that communities might implement here. So we'll have to talk further to see how we can get that plugged in and get that out to the group. You know, we cross promote both networks, so that if you're here and you want to hear more about Safe Routes to School, we invite you to join that. And I know Eric does a great job at promoting this webinar as well, so you guys can get plugged in where you would like to be to get the information you need. So, and we do have a comment in the chat box here just about as well, looking at the difference between Towards Zero Death and Vision Zero. So some of the bigger cities are working on those. So one other comment here, speed is a function of design, and we need to be working on pressuring the designers of our streets that causes more friction for drivers, so they feel like they need to drive slower. Any comments related to that? I guess either Dan or, you know, Dave.
Yeah, I think I referenced this at the beginning of the presentation of saying, you know, our infrastructure is lacking throughout the country for making it safe for people walking and biking. And there's a lot of catching up to the way that we decided to design our communities, you know, back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s with current needs. One, I guess it's worth mentioning, and I'm sure Cindy's aware of this, but one of the ways we've been trying to test those designs in communities is with demonstration projects, which are, you know, short-term, temporary ways for us to test, you know, narrowing the roadways, or you know, using design to reduce speed in a way that a community can see it. Because the reality is, you know, when you go in there and you design something that reduces the speed for vehicles, there can be a lot of negative comments that come back from that community about the fact that it's going to take them a little bit longer to get somewhere. And so there really is that tension between, you know, trying to do something where you want to reduce the speeds and you want to change the roadway, and then community input where the majority of users of that roadway are driving. And so what does that look like when you do public engagement and hear back that so many people are frustrated with the changes to the roadway? And it is really, you know, Matthew speaking to like ways that you might engage as an advocacy group is, you know, it's really important that your voices and your members' voices are heard when projects like those are being implemented. Otherwise, we end up with, you know, more comments from drivers.
This is a great segue into what we'll be continuing the conversation with in both November and December. You know, in November, we're going to be talking about the car-free space in Stillwater that they've designed in Chestnut, and some of the conversations around that, things that went well, things that didn't go so well, and how that has unfolded. And then in December, we're going to move to Rochester. And I know there's been a lot of dialogue today from folks in Rochester engaging with this topic today on walking and with the speakers, and we'll be talking about biking and walking for all ages in December with the Spotlight community in Rochester. So how this might look for the different aged groups, it may look very different, you know, and so just like how does that go, and how are we making that welcoming space for all ages for biking and walking? So all right, one other comment here, and this is from Dorian. Vision Zero and vulnerable users are likely to be a much bigger part of the federal transportation legislation now being debated in Washington, D.C. If it passes, it will add a lot of money to the pedestrian safety pod and require the Department of Public Safety to play a bigger role in vulnerable user safety. And I think this will be a good time here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, and I would like to welcome Dorian to just speak for a moment here. I have a slide for you. And Dorian Greeley here is our Executive Director at the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota. And did you want to make any additional comment related to the legislative piece? And then I'll, we popped up the screen here. So Dorian, welcome to the call.
Thanks, Natalie. My only other comment is that, you know, the language that we've been talking about since May, which is the Senate's Infrastructure and Jobs Act, may remain entwined with the reconciliation and budget discussion of the much bigger proposal, maybe even till the end of the year. So unfortunately, we may not know what's coming in the form of transportation till then, but you know, I'm still quite optimistic that the number is going to be bigger, and that vulnerable users are going to be elevated at a higher role, and that even Vision Zero might come as a federal mandate. But I simply want to thank everyone who helped make the Mankato River Ramble a big success. It was about the most we've ever had in Mankato. Unfortunately, we were about 20 pieces of pie short for everybody that rode to the Rapidan Dam. But it was a big success. And I love to tell people that, you know, yes, this is a fundraiser and our big rides are all fundraisers for the Bicycle Alliance and our local advocacy organizations. But I think the most important role that they play is talking, making it visible to community leaders that people really, really support bicycling. Mayor Carter and Mayor Coleman in St. Paul both have ridden the St. Paul Classic and have said that the St. Paul Classic helped them realize that people in St. Paul really, really love bicycling, and that investing $60 million over the last 10 years was a great investment that people really, really wanted. So thanks again for all those of you who visited Mankato for the ride, and some who may have volunteered and rode at the same time. So, and is there one more slide, Natalie?
No, this is the end of the slide presentation, but you can feel free to go ahead and speak about that other piece if you'd like.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know, or we wanted to let everyone know that MnDOT Sustainable Transportation Advisory Council is accepting applications as we speak. I just resubmitted mine. I've served for the last 2 years on their Sustainable Transportation Advisory Council, and hope to serve representing biking and walking statewide on that committee again. But I really encourage you who don't live in the metro area or don't work in the metro area to consider applying, because the representation from Greater Minnesota is lacking. There's a county engineer from Greater Minnesota and a few other people, but I think it's really, really important that we get more people to represent Greater Minnesota on that Sustainable Transportation Advisory Council. And if you just Google MnDOT STAC, you'll find the web page, the MnDOT page that, oh, there it is right there. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Dorian, for sharing that. And Dorian, just so you know, there was a comment in the chat box while you're sharing about the Mankato River Ramble that if I had realized that it included bluegrass music and pie, that I would have signed up. So,
it is a really great bluegrass band that plays, as you can see, right next to the tables full of pie.
The pictures speak 1,000 words, right?
Yeah. And by the way, Dave, thanks for the warning. I didn't get the chill pills in the dog soon enough. She's barking under the bed right now.
Well, thank you. Stay safe, everyone in the metro. If this, it sounds like there's a storm coming through in those parts, and if there's any other folks around the state here that are experiencing some bad weather today, but stay safe. And thank you so much for joining this webinar today about walking. And we want to give a special thanks to Dan Farnsworth and Dave Cowan for speaking today, and for Dorian to share a little information from the legislative piece. And we welcome you all to join us back here again in November. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Natalie.